The rain tapped insistently against the single-pane window of Clara's third-floor walk-up in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. Inside the apartment, smelled of rosin and chamomile. A thrift store upright piano took up half the living room, its ivory keys yellowed from decades of honest use. At 27, Clara Bennett earned just enough teaching at the Brooklyn Arts Academy to cover rent, MetroCard, and the occasional splurge on sheet music. She rode a battered Schwinn with a basket full of graded assignments, humming whatever her students had mangled that week. Life was small, predictable, and most days enough. Tonight, the predictability shattered. Her phone buzzed on the music stand. Unknown number. She almost let it ring out, but something in the rhythm of the rain made her answer. Miss Clara Bennett. The voice was clipped official. This is Officer Reyes, NYSP Troop K. I'm sorry to inform you there's been an accident. The words arrived in slow motion. Hudson Valley single vehicle. William Bennett pronounced dead at the scene. Clara's knees found the scuffed hardwood before she realized she'd dropped the phone. Rain became a roar in her ears. She saw her grandfather's hands veined steady, guiding hers over Middle C when she was 5. Feel the weight, Clara. Not the noise. William Bennett had built half the glass towers piercing the Manhattan skyline, yet he'd spent every summer teaching his only granddaughter scales on a Steinway older than the suburb around it. The Westchester estate had felt like a museum. Marble Echo's staff who spoke in whispers, a music room where sunlight pooled like warm honey. Clara remembered sneaking downstairs after bedtime barefoot to find him playing Debussy under a single lamp. He never scolded her. Money's just a tool, Clara, he'd say, closing the fallboard. Your soul's the real inheritance. Guard it. She hadn't seen him in 3 years. Not since the fight, her refusal to join the family firm, his quiet disappointment, masking pride. She'd chosen this life. Cracked linoleum students who paid in installments, the pure ring of a child nailing a tricky trill. He'd sent birthday cards with checks she returned uncashed. Stubborn girl, he'd written once. Like her grandmother. The next morning Clara took the F train to Manhattan in a daze. James Whitcomb's office occupied the 42nd floor of a building her grandfather had developed in the 80s. The elevator hummed like an expensive hive. She wore the same black dress she'd worn to her students' recitals, simple cotton hem slightly frayed. The receptionist's smile faltered when Clara gave her name. Mr. Whitcomb was younger than she expected, mid-40s, with the kind of calm that came from handling other people's fortunes. He closed the door softly. Clara. Thank you for coming. He gestured to a leather chair that probably cost more than her annual salary. I know this is overwhelming. Saturday. The rain had followed her, streaking the floor to ceiling windows. Just tell me what I need to sign for the funeral arrangements. James opened a folder. Inside was a single document, thick cream stock, her grandfather's looping signature at the bottom. There won't be any funeral arrangements from you. William took care of everything. He slid the page across the desk. He left instructions. And everything else. Clara stared at the numbers. $7 billion. Liquid assets, trusts, real estate, 2 private jets she'd never known existed. A foundation in her name. The piano in Westchester, that piano deeded to her personally. Her mouth went dry. There's a letter, James said, producing a sealed envelope. Her name in William's handwriting, the same ink he'd used to correct her childhood fingering. She broke the seal with shaking fingers. My dearest Clara. If you're reading this, I've finally run out of encores. I won't insult you with apologies for the distance we both chose our paths. But I've watched you from afar, and I'm prouder than any boardroom ever made me. The money terrified your father. It will terrify him more now. He'll come with reasons, tears, maybe threats. Remember, a tool is only as good as the hand that wields it. Your hand, Clara. Not theirs. Play beautifully. Live simply, if that's your song. But never let them steal the music. All my love, Grandpa. James cleared his throat. There are contingencies. Your parents have been notified. They're on their way. Clara folded the letter, the paper crisp between her fingers. Outside, thunder rolled over the city her grandfather had helped shape. She thought of her students, little Maya, who'd just mastered for Elise, the way her face lit up like Christmas. She thought of her parents' McMansion in Connecticut, the way her mother's voice sharpened whenever money was mentioned. The intercom buzzed. Mr. and Mrs. Bennett are here. James met her eyes. You don't have to see them today. But Clara was already standing. The dress clung to her damp skin. The envelope felt heavier than the billions it represented. She slipped it into her pocket next to a crumpled pack of guitar picks one of her students had given her. Send them in, she said. Her voice didn't shake. Let's see what song they think they're entitled to. The door opened. Her parents swept in, her father in a charcoal suit that cost more than her rent, her mother clutching a designer handbag like a shield. Their faces were masks of grief right up until they saw her standing by the window, city sprawling beneath her like a map of someone else's life. Clara, her mother began, voice already trembling with rehearsed sorrow. Darling, we need to talk about. No, Clara said. The single word cut through the room like a rest in music. She felt the letter against her hip, her grandfather's hand on her shoulder, though he was miles away in the ground. We really don't. Her father's eyes flicked to the document on the desk. $7 billion. His jaw worked soundlessly. Clara turned back to the window. Rain had stopped. Sunlight pierced the clouds, striking the Hudson in silver shards. Somewhere below, a child was learning their first scale. She smiled, small and fierce. The real inheritance had never been the money. It was the silence between the notes, the moment when the music and the choice became hers alone. The elevator to James Whitcomb's office rose with a soft mechanical sigh Clara remembered from childhood visits to her grandfather's towers. 42 floors in 20 seconds. She counted them the way she once counted measures in a Bach prelude, 1, 2, 3, until the doors slid open onto hushed carpet and the faint scent of money. Edward and Margaret Bennett were already seated in the anteroom, arranged like mannequins in a luxury catalog. Her father's cufflinks caught the light, her mother's perfume arrived before she did. Nathan slouched in the corner, thumbs flicking across his phone earbuds, leaking tinny hip-hop. None of them looked up when Clara entered. Darling, Margaret said, rising with the practiced glide of someone who'd taken media training courses. You look tired. The word tired carried the weight of disheveled, unpresentable, still pedaling that ridiculous bicycle. Margaret's eyes flicked to Clara's scuffed boots, the hem of her coat still damp from the morning's drizzle. Edward didn't stand. He adjusted his tie, instead the navy silk printed with tiny gold crests. We were told 10 o'clock sharp. You're late. Train was delayed, Clara said. It wasn't true, she'd walked the last 8 blocks to steady her breathing. She took the remaining chair, the leather creaking like an accusation. Nathan finally glanced up. 29, still boyish in the way only trust fund exhaustion allows, he offered the half smirk that had once charmed venture capitalists. Heard the old man, finally kicked it. Tragic. He said, tragic the way other people say, jackpot. James Whitcomb appeared in the doorway, folders tucked under one arm. If everyone's ready, they filed into the conference room. Mahogany table, 12 chairs, a view south toward the harbor where ferries cut white wakes. Clara sat opposite her family, the expanse of polished wood, a moat. James took the head, opened the first folder and began. The preliminaries were swift: date of death, cause massive trauma, instantaneous funeral already arranged and paid for, cremation, no service, ashes to be scattered over the Hudson from the Westchester Bluffs at dawn. William's instructions notarized 6 months ago. Edward cleared his throat. The estate. James didn't look up. In a moment. He read the minor bequests: first $20 million to the Juilliard Scholarship Fund, 10 to the Hudson Valley Land Trust, 5 each to 3 former housekeepers, now in their 80s. Clara's parents shifted in their seats like racehorses at the gate. Then James turned the page. To my grandson Nathan Bennett I leave the sum of $1 to be delivered in coin, so he may hear the sound opportunity makes when it finally runs out. Nathan barked a laugh that died quickly. Margaret's hand flew to her pearls. Edward leaned forward. That's absurd. He's joking. James continued, voice flat. To my son Edward and daughter-in-law Margaret I leave the Connecticut residence mortgage paid on the condition they vacate within 30 days of my death. Failure to comply triggers sale proceeds to the Clara Bennett Music Foundation. Margaret made a small wounded sound. And to my granddaughter Clara Marie Bennett, James said, meeting her eyes for the first time, I leave the remainder of my estate, liquid assets, real property, equities, and intellectual property valued at $7,143 million as of market close yesterday. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Clara felt the numbers settle on her shoulders like a cape made of lead. Edward was on his feet. This is elder abuse. He was on painkillers, Mr. Bennett. James interrupted. Your father was examined by 3 physicians quarterly. Capacity affirmed each time. He slid a thin stack of medical reports across the table. Edward ignored them. Margaret's voice trembled with theatrical vibrato. Clara, sweetheart, you can't possibly manage that kind of money. You teach children. On a bicycle. Nathan finally spoke, low and venomous. You're going to hog it all, after everything we Clara found her voice. There's more. Keep reading, Mr. Whitcomb. James nodded almost imperceptibly. There is a codicil. Miss Bennett, if you'll allow me to summarize privately afterward. Edward slammed a palm on the table. No secrets. We're family. The word family landed like a slap. Clara felt the old ache bloom behind her ribs, the one that started at age 8 when her parents missed her first recital because Nathan had a Little League banquet. Age 12 when they forgot her birthday but flew to Vegas for his startup pitch. Age 16 when Edward told her Juilliard was a hobby not a future, and Margaret suggested she network at the country club instead. She looked at them now, really looked. Edward's hair had thinned to a comb-over, he thought no one noticed. Margaret's filler had settled into a permanent pout. Nathan's pupils were pinpricks, he hadn't slept without chemical help in years. They were strangers wearing the faces of people who'd once tucked her in. Clara stood. I'll see the codicil alone. Edward started to object, but James was already moving, ushering her into a smaller office with frosted glass. He closed the door on her family's rising voices. Inside, the silence was sudden and complete. James handed her a single sheet, heavier stock, William's handwriting again. Clara, they'll tell you blood is thicker than water. Their half-right blood is thicker, which is why it clots. The foundation is yours to run or dissolve. The jets you may sell, the music room you must keep. There's a clause they don't know if any beneficiary contests this will their share, however small, reverts to the scholarship fund. Your father signed the prenup I drafted in '89, he knows I don't bluff. One last thing. In the false panel behind the Steinway left side 3rd octave, there's a ledger. Read it when you're ready. Not before. Play loudly enough to drown them out. W. Clara folded the letter, slipped it into the same pocket as yesterday's note. Through the frosted glass she could see silhouettes, Edward pacing, Margaret dabbing her eyes with a tissue that probably cost more than Clara's weekly grocery budget, Nathan lighting a cigarette despite the signs. James spoke softly. You have options. Annulment of contest, countersuit, restraining orders. I can file by noon. She shook her head. Not yet. Outside the city hummed 42 floors below, indifferent. Clara thought of the ledger hidden in the music room of arguments she'd overheard as a child. When the old man goes our turn she'll sign anything, words that had drifted under her bedroom door like smoke. She thought of the first time she'd played Carnegie Hall's practice rooms on a scholarship audition, how the acoustics had felt like flying. How her parents hadn't come because Nathan's startup had a critical demo that flopped anyway. James touched her elbow. Take the freight elevator down. Avoid the lobby circus. Clara nodded. As they walked the service corridor, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, she felt the weight of $7 billion settle into something else entirely, leverage. Not the kind her father understood, hostile takeovers, golden parachutes, but the quiet kind that let a person disappear into a life they chose. The elevator doors closed. For the first time in 27 years, Clara was alone with her family, and completely untouchable. Down in the service bay, a town car idled, James's precaution. The driver held the door. Clara paused. Actually, she said, I'll take the subway. She stepped into the drizzle, collar up, boots splashing through puddles that reflected a sky the color of minor keys. Somewhere above, her family was still shouting at a lawyer who wouldn't flinch. Clara pulled out her phone, opened the rideshare app and booked a ticket North Westchester one way. The Steinway was waiting. So was the ledger. And for the first time the silence between notes felt like power. The conference room on the 42nd floor of 1185 Avenue of the Americas had been designed to intimidate, floor-to-ceiling glass, a table carved from a single slab of Calacatta marble, and a digital clock on the wall that counted seconds like a metronome. At 10:03 a.m. On a gray November morning, the Bennett family sat in a perfect triangle of hostility. Edward Bennett arrived first, briefcase snapping open with the authority of a man who'd spent 30 years moving commas in spreadsheets. Margaret followed, Louboutins, clicking like a countdown. Nathan slunk in last, hoodie half sipped over yesterday's t-shirt, eyes red-rimmed and restless. They took the 3 chairs opposite Clara without asking. James Whitcomb entered at 10:05 sharp, flanked by a junior associate carrying a steel case the size of a violin. He placed it on the table with deliberate care. Thank you for coming on short notice, James began. Mr. Bennett, William recorded final instructions 3 weeks ago. We'll proceed in order. Edward cut in. Let's skip the theater. Where's the money? James didn't blink. Page 1. He opened the will, thick vellum black letterpress, William's signature sprawling across the bottom like a dare. The room's temperature seemed to drop another degree. Item principal, James Reed. To my granddaughter Clara Marie Bennett I bequeath the entirety of my residual estate, real property in Manhattan, Westchester, Aspen, and Nassau. Equity positions in Bennett Holdings, Bennett REIT and Bennett Ventures, cash and cash equivalents, and the William Bennett Charitable Remainder Unitrust. Current valuation $7,143,211,000 US. Silence detonated. Margaret's manicured hand flew to her throat. Nathan let out a sound halfway between laugh and snarl. Edward's face cycled through purple, white and purple again. Impossible, Edward hissed. He changed it last year. I have the draft. You have a draft, James corrected. This is the executed original. Witnessed by 2 partners and a notary. Filed yesterday at Surrogate's Court. He pressed a remote. A panel in the wall slid aside, revealing a 75-inch screen. William Bennett appeared alive, sharp-eyed, seated at the Steinway in the Westchester Music Room. The video was dated the 14th of October 2025. If you're watching this, I'm gone. Good riddance to board meetings. His voice, gravelly but warm, filled the room. Clara, you're the only one who ever asked me to play Claire de Lune instead of asking for a loan. The rest of you, he looked straight into the lens, stopped seeing people and started seeing percentages. Margaret gasped. Nathan muttered something obscene. Edward, you turned my company into a casino and lost $300 million on crypto synergies. Margaret, you spent more on handbags last year than the foundation gave to music scholarships in a decade. Nathan Williams' eyes narrowed. You gambled away your seed round at Foxwoods. I'm done bailing water from a sinking ship. The cameras zoomed in. Clara lives on $38,000 a year and still tips her subway musician. She's the only one who knows money is a tool, not a god. The estate is hers. Contest it and you get nothing but legal fees. I tripled the no contest clause. Ask James. The screen went black. Edward was on his feet. This is elder abuse. She manipulated him, visited him alone. False, James said, sliding a visitor log across the marble. Clara's last visit was Christmas 2022. You, Edward, logged 42 visits in the past year. All documented. Margaret's voice shrilled. A piano teacher. She can't even balance her own checkbook. Clara spoke for the first time. I balance it every month. In the black. Nathan leaned forward, knuckles white. You owe us, Clara. Blood. She laughed, sharp as a snapped string. You mean the blood you lost at the blackjack table? Grandpa's will is clear. No. Edward's eyes narrowed to slits. You think you can just walk away with $7 billion? We'll tie this up in court for years. You'll be 50 before you see a cent. James lifted a second document. Addendum B. Any litigation triggers immediate escrow of the entire estate into the Clara Bennett Music Foundation, irrevocable. You'll sue a charity. Good luck with the optics. Margaret lunged across the table, claws out. You ungrateful little. Clara didn't flinch. Touch me and I press charges. The junior associate stepped forward, hand on a phone. Security was one button away. Nathan tried a different tack, voice oily. Sis, come on. 10%. Just to keep the peace. No. Edward slammed the table. This isn't over. You'll regret this, Clara. We know people. Judges. Reporters. One leak about your simple life and the IRS will crawl so far up your. James stood. Threat recorded. Meeting adjourned. He pressed the intercom. Security to conference room 42B. 2 guards appeared within seconds. Edward's face twisted into something feral. As Clara gathered her coat, he leaned in, breath hot with rage. You think money buys safety? Wait until you're alone in that big house. Accidents happen. Clara met his gaze. So do consequences. She walked out first, boots steady on the marble. The elevator ride down was silent except for the hum of cables. In the lobby, paparazzi were already gathering. Someone had tipped them off. Flashbulbs popped like gunfire. James caught her elbow. Cars waiting in the garage. I'll have the foundation papers couriered to Brooklyn tonight. Clara nodded. Outside, the November wind whipped trash along the sidewalk. She pulled up her collar and stepped into the crowd. Behind her, through the glass doors, she could see her family still shouting at James' gestures, wild mouths open in soundless fury. The storm had broken and she was already walking through the rain. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. The doorman at 820 Fifth Avenue recognized Clara the instant the cab pulled up. He'd known her since she was 12, arriving for Sunday brunches in patent leather shoes. Tonight, he hesitated, eyes flicking to the duffel bag slung over her shoulder, then to the bruise-colored sky behind her. "Miss Bennett," he said softly. "Your parents are expecting you." Clara handed him a folded 20. "I won't be long, Marco." The private elevator still smelled of cedar, and Margaret's signature tuberose. 32 floors up, the doors opened directly into the foyer, black and white marble, a Basquiat that had tripled in value since Clara was in high school. She stepped inside and the apartment swallowed her whole. Edward stood beneath the chandelier, arms crossed, tie loosened like a noose he'd already slipped. Margaret perched on the edge of a dove-gray sofa, legs crossed at the ankle, wineglass trembling in her grip. Nathan sprawled in the Eames chair, feet on the ottoman, scrolling his phone with one thumb. "Close the door," Edward said. His voice carried the same clipped cadence he used in boardrooms. "We're doing this civilly." Clara let the duffel slide to the floor. Inside, 2 changes of clothes, her grandfather's photograph in a cracked leather frame, the Mont Blanc fountain pen he'd given her on her 16th birthday, and the brass key to the Westchester house, weighty, old-fashioned, warm from her pocket. Margaret spoke first. "Sit down, darling. You look like a street musician." Clara remained standing. "I'm not staying." Edward ignored her. He crossed to the bar cart, poured 2 fingers of Macallan into a crystal tumbler and slid a folder across the coffee table. The cover read "Settlement Proposal" in bold serif. "$700 million, he said. 10%. More than you'll ever need. Sign and we all walk away friends." Clara opened the folder, the numbers blurred, trust structures, tax shelters, and non-disclosure clause longer than her senior thesis. She closed it again. "No." Margaret's laugh was brittle. "Don't be dramatic. You teach children to plink out twinkle twinkle for $30 an hour. You can't manage a portfolio that size." "I don't want to manage it," Clara said. "I want to use it." Nathan finally looked up. "Use it on what? More thrift store pianos? Give me a break. That money could restart my fund. I'm sitting on a Series B that'll 10x in 18 months. You're sitting on a bar tab at One Oak," Clara said. "Grandpa paid it last month." Nathan flushed crimson. Margaret set her glass down hard enough to crack the stem. Edward's voice dropped to a dangerous register. "You think this is about music lessons, that money is leverage. Political donations, private schools for your future children. Security. You'll be a target, kidnappers, gold diggers, the IRS. Sign Clara. Let professionals handle it." She felt the old fracture lines reopen, every missed recital, every eye roll when she practiced scales instead of sat prep. The apartment's silence pressed in thick as the Aubusson rug under her boots. "Grandpa didn't leave it to professionals," she said. "He left it to me because I never asked him for a dime. Because I saw him, not his bank account." Edward's face hardened. "You saw an old man with dementia who romanticized poverty. He saw a daughter-in-law who charged Hermes to the company card and a son who confused spreadsheets with soul. He saw me play Chopin in a basement recital hall with 30 people and cry because it was enough." Margaret stood. "Enough. You're embarrassing yourself. And us." Clara Bennett unzipped the duffel and pulled out the photograph, William at 80 smiling beside a 12-year-old Clara at the Steinway, her fingers barely spanning an octave. She set it on the coffee table like evidence. "This is what I inherited," she said. "Not the money. The choice." Edward stared at the photo as if it were radioactive. Then he moved, swift, decisive, snatching the frame and hurling it against the marble hearth. Glass exploded in a glittering arc. "You want choices," he roared. "Here's one. Sign or get out. You're not my daughter. You're a parasite who got lucky." Margaret gasped but didn't stop him. Nathan smirked. Clara didn't flinch. She knelt, picked up the photograph, frame shattered but the image intact, and slipped it into her coat pocket. The Mont Blanc went in next. Then the key, heavy and real in her palm. "I was never your daughter the way you wanted," she said. "I was his granddaughter. That's enough." She shouldered the duffel and walked toward the elevator. Edward blocked her path, face inches from hers. "You'll come crawling back when the first lawsuit hits. When the paparazzi camp outside your hovel. When you realize $7 billion is a life sentence." Clara pressed the call button. "Then I'll serve it on my terms." The doors slid open. She stepped inside. As they closed, Margaret's voice floated after her, thin and desperate. "Clara, please." The elevator descended in silence. 32 floors to freedom. Marco held the door again when she reached the lobby. Rain had started a cold November drizzle that smelled of the park. Clara pulled up her hood. "Need a cab, miss? I've got one," she said, nodding toward the corner where a black Suburban idled James Whitcomb's Precaution. The driver popped the trunk without a word. Inside the car, heat blasted against the chill. Clara gave the address, 47 Old Mill Lane, Tarrytown. The driver raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Traffic crawled up the FDR, then onto the Henry Hudson Parkway. Clara watched the city recede in the side mirror, skyscrapers shrinking to matchsticks, the bridge lights smearing into watercolor. Her phone buzzed incessantly. Edward, Margaret, Nathan, unknown numbers. She powered it off. An hour later, the Suburban turned onto a gravel drive flanked by stone pillars. The gate recognized the transponder in Clara's key fob and swung inward without a sound. Motion sensors flicked on, illuminating the long sweep of lawn silvered with frost. The house loomed, federal brick green shutters, the music room wing jutting like a ship's prow. No lights inside. The staff had been given notice per William's instructions. Clara paid the driver in cash, shouldered her bag, and walked the flagstone path alone. The key turned with a soft snick. Inside, the air was cool and still scented faintly of lemon oil and old sheet music. Moonlight spilled through the fanlight over the door, striping the parquet in pale bars. Clara dropped her bag in the foyer and went straight to the music room. The Steinway-weighted lid closed, a single envelope propped against the fallboard. Her name in William's handwriting. She opened it with fingers that didn't shake. "Welcome home, kid. Fridge is stocked. Wi-Fi password is your first recital piece, Bach prelude in C. The ledger's where I said. When you're ready, play something loud enough to wake the neighbors. They're 3 miles away. You're not alone. You never were." Clara lifted the lid. The keys gleamed like moonlight on water. She sat, flexed her hands, and began Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, first movement slow and inevitable. The sound filled the house, rolled through empty corridors, climbed the staircase, spilled out into the night. Outside, the rain softened to a whisper. Inside, the music answered every slammed door, every shattered frame, every threat. This wasn't the end. It was the downbeat. The gravel crunched under Clara's boots as the wrought iron gates sighed shut behind her. The Westchester night pressed close, crisp, star-drenched, smelling of wet leaves and chimney smoke from some distant neighbor. She stood a moment on the threshold, duffel heavy on her shoulder, the brass key still warm in her palm. The house rose before her like a promise kept, 3 stories of weathered brick, ivy clinging to the chimneys, every window dark except the fanlight above the door glowing faintly from the motion sensor she'd triggered. She climbed the stone steps. The key slid home with the soft finality of a resolved chord. Inside, the air wrapped around her, cedar from the paneled foyer, a trace of lavender from the bowls. Eleanor kept on the console, and beneath it all the faint, unmistakable breath of old money that had learned to be quiet. Moonlight striped the parquet through the transom, dust motes drifted like slow eighth notes. Clara let the duffel fall. The thud echoed up the staircase and vanished into the high ceilings. She was alone, yet the house felt inhabited by memory, every creak of the floorboards a footstep she almost recognized. A soft click of a latch. Light spilled from the kitchen corridor. "Miss Clara." The voice was low, familiar, edged with 30 years of Yorkshire vowels. Eleanor Hayes stepped into the foyer, apron crisp despite the hour, silver hair pinned in a neat bun. She carried a battery lantern that painted warm gold across her lined face. "Eleanor." Clara's throat tightened. The housekeeper had been a fixture since Clara was in pigtails, bandaging, scraped knees, smuggling extra cookies, humming hymn tunes, while polishing the banister. "I thought I'd find you tonight," Eleanor said. She set the lantern on the console and opened her arms. Clara walked into them without thinking. The embrace smelled of starch and Earl Grey. "Your grandfather knew this day would come. Said to keep the kettle on and the gates oiled." Clara pulled back, blinking hard. "You stayed." "Contract runs through the estate," Eleanor said briskly, but her eyes were soft. "Besides, someone has to keep the mice from throwing parties." She glanced at the duffel. "Let's get you settled. Then Coco. You look half frozen." They moved through the house like conspirators. Eleanor flicked on low lamps as they went, sconces that turned the music room into a golden cave, the Steinway, a dark island in the center. Clara paused at the threshold, breath catching. The lid was closed, a single white envelope propped against the fallboard, exactly as William had promised. Later, Eleanor murmured. "First food." The kitchen was warm, copper pots gleaming above the aga. Eleanor produced a tray tomato soup still steaming, thick slices of soda bread, a wedge of farmhouse cheddar. Clara ate standing at the island, suddenly ravenous. Between mouthfuls Eleanor talked quiet, steady, the way she used to narrate bedtime stories. Your father came the day after the accident. With a moving van, said he was cataloging valuables. I locked the silver in the pantry and called Mr. Whitcomb. They left when the police arrived. Clara's spoon paused. Police, Mr. Williams' instructions. Motion sensors on the safe, silent alarm to the precinct. Your mother tried the jewelry vault next, code hadn't changed since she was married in. Failed 3 times and triggered the die pack. Eleanor's mouth twitched. Ruined a rather expensive Chanel. Clara laughed short, surprised, the sound echoing off the subway tile. Nathan tried the wine cellar, Eleanor continued. Found the 82 Petrus relabeled as cooking sherry. He drank half a bottle before he realized. She shook her head. I've aired the guest rooms, but I thought you'd want your old one. They climbed the main staircase, Eleanor's lantern swinging gentle shadows across portraits. Clara hadn't seen in years, great-grandparents in sepia, a young William in navy dress, whites Clara, at 8 in a velvet Christmas dress. Gap-toothed and solemn beside the tree. Her bedroom door stood ajar. Someone Eleanor had turned down the quilt, set a hot water bottle between the sheets, laid out flannel pajamas that still had the tags. I wasn't sure of your size now, Eleanor said. Guessed medium. Close enough. Clara ran a hand over the familiar patchwork squares from her baby blanket, her first recital dress, the lining of William's old smoking jacket. Perfect. Eleanor hesitated. There's something else. In the study. He left it for tonight. Clara followed her down the hall. The study smelled of leather and pipe tobacco that would never quite air out. The desk was cleared except for a brass banker's lamp and a small lacquered box. Inside, a second key smaller, and a note in William's spidery hand. Clara, trust your gut. Eleanor is family, treat her as such. The wall safe behind the constable painting combination, your Juilliard audition date 04232016 holds the real ledger and the foundation charter. Read when you're ready. Sleep first. The house is yours now. Make it sing. W. Clara turned the key over in her palm. It was warm, as if it had been waiting. Eleanor touched her elbow. I'll be in the East Wing if you need anything. Ring the bell by the bed still works. She paused at the door. He was proud of you, miss. Every day. After she left, Clara stood a moment in the hush. Then she went to the music room. Moonlight poured through the tall windows, silvering the Steinway. She lifted the lid. The keys gleamed like a promise. She didn't sit, just rested her hands on the cool ivory, feeling the faint indentations of a lifetime of music. Somewhere in the walls, the house settled with a soft sigh, as if exhaling years of tension. Back in her room, she changed into the pajamas, crawled between sheets that smelled of line-dried cotton and lavender. The hot water bottle had cooled to the perfect warmth. Outside, an owl called once, then silence. Clara lay in the dark, staring at the glow in the dark stars she and William had stuck to the ceiling when she was 10. They still worked, faint green constellations mapping a sky that hadn't changed. She felt the key on the nightstand, the weight of the envelope in her coat downstairs, the echo of Eleanor's footsteps retreating down the hall. For the first time since the phone call in the rain, the ache in her chest eased. The house breathed around her, old beams, older secrets, the faint scent of rosin from the music room. William was in the grain of the wood, the curve of the banister, the way the moonlight fell across the quilt. She whispered into the dark, I'm home. Sleep came quickly, dreamless, the kind that resets the soul. When she woke, the first pale light of morning would be slipping through the curtains. Eleanor would have coffee brewing and the ledger would be waiting. Tomorrow, the fight would continue. Tonight, the house held her like a cord that refused to resolve, suspended, perfect, hers. Dawn broke over the Hudson in thin blades of pink and steel. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and the faint clink of porcelain from downstairs. She found Eleanor in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, scrambling eggs with the same copper pan she'd used for Sunday breakfasts 20 years ago. Mr. Whitcomb called, Eleanor said, sliding a plate across the island. He'll be here by 9, said to bring the good stationery. Clara ate, standing up, the warmth of the food grounding her. The house felt different in daylight, less museum, more fortress. Sunlight poured through the mullioned windows, catching dust motes like suspended notes. She wore yesterday's jeans and one of William's old cashmere sweaters, sleeves pushed to the elbows. It smelled faintly of cedar and the ghost of his aftershave. James arrived at 8:57, tires crunching on frost-rimmed gravel. He carried a leather satchel and the kind of expression that meant business. Eleanor took his coat, hung it on the hall tree beside Clara's threadbare peacoat, and disappeared with the discretion of a seasoned conductor. They gathered in the study. James laid the satchel on the desk like a surgeon opening a kit. Inside a thick manila envelope sealed with red wax, William's monogram pressed deep. "He wrote this the week before the accident," James said. "Told me to deliver it only after you'd spent a night in the house. Said you'd need the walls to hold you up." Clara broke the seal. The letter was 12 pages, handwritten on heavy creamstock ink, bleeding slightly where William's pen had pressed too hard. "Clara, if you're reading this, the vultures are circling. Good. Let them. I've spent 60 years building walls they can't climb. But walls need a keeper, and that's you now. Your father started tunneling the day he turned 30. I have proof: emails, wire transfers, board minutes he thought I'd never see. He's been siphoning for a decade. Not enough to notice if you're not looking, but enough to bleed a whale. The crash wasn't random. I've suspected for months." She looked up. James nodded. "Keep going." The letter continued. "I hired Lila Lang, yes, the same Lila who ran security for the REIT. She's ex-Mossad, doesn't miss much. She'll be here at 10. Listen to her. Your grandmother's journals are in the safe. Eleanor knows the combination. Read them tonight. Margaret's in deeper than you think. PR isn't just image, it's cover. There's a hard drive in the music room, false panel. Everything's on it. Password is the first measure of your Juilliard audition piece transposed to numbers. 4231542. They'll come for you. Let them. The house is wired, cameras in every room, motion-triggered cloud backup. I started recording the day Edward asked for the combination to the vault. You're not just inheriting money, kid. You're inheriting a war. Fight it with music. They'll never understand the weapon. W." Clara folded the pages with shaking hands. Eleanor appeared in the doorway holding a small leather-bound book, edges worn, spine cracked. "Amelia Bennett, 1998 to 2014. Your grandmother's," Eleanor said. "She started writing when the first investment went south. Edward convinced your grandfather to back a shell company in the Caymans. Lost 40 million. She documented everything." Clara took the journal. The first entry was dated the week Clara was born. "He cried when he signed the papers. Said it was for the children's future. I think he knew even then." Footsteps on the gravel outside. A second car, a matte black Range Rover. Lila Lang stepped out, mid-40s, cropped hair, eyes that catalogued exits before greetings. She carried a tablet and a coffee in a paper cup. "Morning," she said, shaking Clara's hand with a grip like steel cable. "Your grandfather was paranoid. Turns out he was right." They moved to the music room. Lila set the tablet on the fallboard, opened a file labeled Operation Clean Slate. Security footage timestamps flickered. Edward in the study at 2:14 a.m. Rifling drawers. Margaret photographing documents in the library. Nathan disabling a camera with a laser pointer. 6 months ago, Lila said Edward approached a competitor, Grayson Capital. Offered to sell controlling interest in Bennett Holdings for $2 billion under market. Needed the board to vote no confidence in William. Planned to cite cognitive decline. Clara's stomach turned. He was going to stage a coup. Worse, Lila said. The crash, single vehicle guardrail failure on a clear night. I pulled the maintenance logs. Someone swapped the bolts 2 days prior. Anonymous tip traced to a burner bought with cash at a Queens bodega. CCTV shows a man in a hoodie matching Nathan's build. Eleanor made a small sound. Clara reached for her hand. "There's more," Lila continued. "Your mother's been laundering through her PR firm. Fake invoices for brand consultations. 6 figures a month. The IRS is already sniffing." William tipped them anonymously. James opened another folder. "The will's ironclad, but they'll contest anyway. We countersue for fraud, embezzlement, attempted corporate sabotage. The evidence is overwhelming." Clara stared at the Steinway. The false panel was seamless, 3rd octave left side, just as William wrote. She pressed the wood. It clicked open. Inside, a slim hard drive wrapped in velvet, a second envelope. "Play me first." She plugged the drive into Lila's tablet. A video file auto-launched. William again, this time in the music room 3 days before the crash. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. "If they come for the company, give them the ledger. If they come for you, give them hell." The foundation charter dissolves the holdings into irrevocable trusts, education, music, low-income housing. They can't touch it. I signed it yesterday. He leaned closer to the camera. Clara, they'll say you're too soft. That money needs a killer. But killers don't build empires, they inherit them and burn them down. You build. That's why it's yours. The screen went black. Silence pooled in the room, thick as the dust on the keys. Outside, a crow landed on the sill, cocked its head, and flew off. Clara closed the panel. The click echoed like a judge's gavel. They didn't just want the money, she said slowly. They wanted to erase him. Everything he stood for. James nodded. And they'll try again. But now we're ready. Eleanor squeezed her shoulder. Lunch in 20. Then we plan. Clara looked around the room at the Steinway that had taught her scales and secrets, at the allies who'd chosen her over blood, at the hard drive that held a decade of betrayal in zeros and ones. She sat at the bench, lifted the lid, and played the opening of Beethoven's Appassionata, fierce, unrelenting, the storm she'd been holding back. The sound filled the house, rolled through the corridors, spilled into the frostbitten garden. Let them come. She was ready to play the finale. The war room was the music room. Clara had pushed the Steinway against the far wall, lid closed, a silent witness. In its place stood a mahogany table dragged in from the library, now covered in laptops, legal pads, and 3 pots of Eleanor's industrial-strength coffee. Sunlight slanted through the tall windows, striping the Persian rug like prison bars. Outside, November, wind rattled the panes. Inside, the only sound was the click of keyboards and the occasional scratch of James Whitcomb's Mont Blanc. Lila Lang arrived first, boots leaving faint frost prints on the parquet. She dropped a thick binder labeled Bennett Holdings, organizational chart, and flipped it open to a page marked with red tabs. 10,000 employees, she said without preamble. 42 states, 3 countries. Average tenure 12 years. You lay off 1, you tank morale for 1,000. Your grandfather ran lean but loyal. Edward's plan was to gut middle management, flip the REIT to Grayson, pocket the spread. We stop that, we save jobs. We fail, we bankrupt families. Clara traced the org chart with a finger that didn't tremble. Names, photos, tenure, dates, human beings reduced to boxes, yet suddenly real. Show me the leverage points. Lila spun the binder. Here. Regional VPs report to you now. Board meets Monday. We need 5 yes votes to block any sale. I've got 3 in pocket. Need 2 more. Done. Clara said. The word tasted like steel. Sam Carter knocked once and entered 6-4, former Marine shoulders filling the doorway. He carried a tablet streaming live feeds from the estate's perimeter cameras. Morning, ma'am. He nodded to Clara, then to Lila. Perimeter's tight. Motion sensors reset to military grade. But you'll want to see this. He swiped. Grainy night vision footage, 2 figures in dark hoodies scaling the service gate at 2:13 a.m. last week. One carried a duffel, the other a crowbar. Edward's silhouette was unmistakable, same impatient gait. Nathan followed, glancing over his shoulder like a bad spy. They hit the pool house, Sam said. Took the backup server William kept offline. Thought they were slick. Didn't know I'd mirrored it to the cloud. James looked up from his laptop. That's felony burglary. We add it to the list. Sam's grin was wolfish. Already drafted the affidavit. The doorbell chimed 3 measured notes. Eleanor appeared in the doorway, apron swapped for a navy blazer, hair pinned severely. Judge Cohen's here. Rachel Cohen swept in like a verdict already rendered. 62 silver bob robe traded for a charcoal pantsuit. She'd presided over half the surrogates' court battles in the state. William had golfed with her husband for 30 years. Clara. The judge's handshake was dry, firm. Your grandfather filed an ex parte order with me 6 months ago. Any contest to the will triggers an automatic freeze on all Bennett Holdings transactions. I signed it yesterday. Effective right now. She slid a document across the table, raised seal, Cohen's flourish beneath. Edward can scream. Nothing moves until trial. Clara exhaled. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Rachel said. He'll countersue for undue influence. We'll bury him in discovery. I want every email, every text, every post-it note he ever scribbled. Sam already pulled metadata, Sam said. Nathan's phone pings off the cell tower here the night of the break-in. GPS puts him in the pool house for 43 minutes. Lila leaned back, arms crossed. We go public, James shook his head. Not yet. Let them think we're scared. Then we drop the hammer. Clara stood. The room quieted the way it does before a conductor lifts the baton. I'm not my grandfather, she said. I don't play chess with people's lives. But I won't let his life's work become a yard sale for traders. 10,000 employees. Scholarships. Low-income housing. That's the legacy. Not their greed. She looked at each of them, Lila's steady calm, Sam's coiled readiness, James's legal scalpel, Rachel's judicial hammer, Eleanor's quiet strength in the doorway. We protect it. Together. Lila's smile was small, sharp. First move, board meeting Monday. I'll have the VPs prepped. You walk in, you own the room. Sam tapped the tablet. Second move, I upgrade the gate to retinal scan by noon. They try again, they lose an eye. Rachel gathered her papers. Third move, I schedule an emergency hearing for Tuesday. We file the freeze order publicly. Markets hate uncertainty, stock dips, Grayson backs off. James closed his laptop. Fourth move, countersuit. Fraud, embezzlement, burglary, attempted sabotage. We serve them at their doorstep. Let the cameras catch their faces. Eleanor cleared her throat. Everyone turned. They're here, she said simply. Through the window, headlights swept the drive, 2 SUVs, black-tinted windows. Doors opened. Edward stepped out first, coat flapping like a battle flag. Margaret followed, clutching a designer briefcase. Nathan brought up the rear, hood up, hands in pockets. Clara's pulse spiked and steadied. She looked at her team. Showtime. Sam was already moving, positioning himself by the front door. Lila cracked her knuckles. James slipped the freeze order into a manila envelope. Rachel adjusted her glasses like a gunslinger checking the chamber. Eleanor met Clara's eyes. Shall I let them in? Miss Clara straightened William's sweater, rolled the sleeves once more, and walked to the foyer. The brass key to the gate still hung on its hook by the door. She pocketed it. Let them knock, she said. Then open the door. But only halfway. Eleanor nodded, the ghost of a smile on her lips. Outside, Edward's fist pounded the oak. Clara. Open this door. We're family. Clara stood in the music room doorway, sunlight at her back, the Steinway behind her like a silent army. She could hear the muffled shouting, the crunch of gravel under expensive shoes, the wind whipping through the oaks. She looked at the team assembled around the table, loyal, fierce, ready. Let them come, she said again, softer this time. We're ready. The doorbell chimed a second time, insistent, furious. Eleanor moved to answer it. The battle had arrived at the gate. Clara was no longer defending a house. She was commanding a fortress. The front door opened exactly 6 inches, Eleanor's limit. Edward's palm slammed against the oak, but the chain held. His face appeared in the gap, flushed eyes wild. Clara, enough games. Sign the transfer or we take this house apart brick by brick. Behind him, Margaret clutched a leather folio like a shield. Nathan shifted from foot to foot, hoodie zipped to the chin despite the mild morning. November light caught the brass knocker, turning it into a cold coin. Clara stepped into the foyer, William's sweater hanging loose on her frame. You're trespassing. Edward shoved harder, the chain rattled. This is my childhood home, was Clara said. Now it's mine, leave. Margaret's voice rose an octave. We just want to talk. Talk, Clara laughed sharp. You brought a locksmith in the trunk last time. Sam Carter appeared, all 6 to 4 of him filling the doorway beside Eleanor. He held up a tablet. Live feed the SUVs, a fourth figure crouched by the gate with a slim Jim. NYPD's, en route. ETA, 4 minutes. Edward's jaw worked. You think cops scare me? No, Clara said. But contempt of a court order might. Judge Cohen, Rachel Cohen stepped forward, black robe swapped for a navy suit, but the authority was the same. She unfolded a document, fresh ink, raised seal. Emergency restraining order. Signed 8:12 a.m. You're within 500 feet of Clara Bennett. Step back. Margaret's eyes darted to the paper. This is harassment, violation is a felony, Rachel said. Back. Now. Nathan tried, the side door locked. Sam's voice crackled through an earpiece, East Wing secure. Edward's composure cracked. Fine. We'll do this your way. He reached inside his coat, produced a single sheet and slid it through the gap. Sign, 10%. 700 million. Walk away clean. Clara didn't touch it. Into the music room, she said. 5 minutes. Then you leave. Eleanor unhooked the chain. The family surged in like a bad chord, Edward first, Margaret's heels stabbing the parquet, Nathan trailing. They stopped dead at the sight of the war table, laptops open, Lila leaning against the Steinway, James standing with a remote. Edward sneered. Staging a board meeting in Daddy's playroom, granddaughter's war room, Lila corrected. She pressed a key. The 75-inch screen descended from the ceiling, same as the Manhattan office. William appeared alive, sharp-seated at the Steinway 3 weeks ago. Edward was fired from Bennett Holdings in 2009, his recorded voice said. Embezzled $2 million through fake vendors. I covered it to spare the family name. Second chance. He blew it in 2015, another $4 million. I removed him from succession. Clara never knew because I didn't want her to grow up hating her father. She gets the estate because she's the only one who never asked for a dime. The video froze on William's face, steady, sad, resolute. Margaret made a strangled sound. Nathan stared at the floor. James clicked to the next file. Eleanor's voice soft but clear, reading from Amelia Bennett's journal, the 12th of October 2009. Edward came home shaking. Said William found the Cayman accounts. Begged me to lie. I refused. He forged my signature anyway. I started writing everything down after that. Page after page flipped on screen, dates, amounts, forged documents. Amelia's neat cursive damning her own son. Sam took the remote. Security footage, Edward and Nathan in the pool house, 2:17 a.m., prying open the server rack. Nathan stuffing hard drives into a backpack. Edward pocketing a flash drive labeled board vote proxy. Felony theft, Sam said. Cloud backups already with the DA. Edward lunged for the screen. Lila intercepted, grip like a vice on his wrist. Touch it and I break it. Rachel stepped forward. You're looking at federal wire fraud, state embezzlement, burglary, conspiracy. Minimum 20 years. Each. Margaret's folio hit the floor, papers scattering. Clara, please. Clara knelt, picked up a single sheet. A contract, Grayson, capital letterhead, Edward's signature, dated yesterday. Sale of controlling interest, Bennett Holdings, $1.8 billion. She held it up. You sold the company behind my back. After the freeze order. Lila smirked. Intercepted at 3:04 a.m. Grayson's GC called me, didn't want to buy stolen goods. Deal's dead. Stocks up 6% on the news. Edward's face went gray. You can't. I can, Clara said, and I will. The foundation charter dissolves the REIT into trusts. No sale. Ever. Nathan finally spoke, voice cracking. You're destroying us. No, Clara said. You did that. Years ago. Silence pulled thick and absolute. Outside, sirens approached, distant then close. Edward straightened his coat, the gesture of a man rearranging dignity from scraps. This isn't over. His eyes found Clara's. You'll beg for that 10% when the lawsuits bury you. Clara walked to the front door, opened it wide. 2 patrol cars idled on the gravel, lights flashing silent red and blue. Leave, she said. Or be removed. Margaret hesitated, then shuffled out. Nathan followed, head down. Edward paused on the threshold. You're weak, he spat. Money needs killers. Clara met his gaze. It needs builders. Goodbye, Dad. The door closed with a soft click. Eleanor engaged the deadbolt. Through the sidelight, Clara watched them climb into the SUVs. Tires spun on gravel, spraying frost. The gates swung shut behind them. Inside, the music room felt suddenly larger. Lila high-fived Sam. James poured coffee like nothing had happened. Rachel gathered her papers. Clara stood at the Steinway, fingers resting on the cool wood. She pressed middle C, pure, unwavering. Eleanor appeared with a dustpan for Margaret's scattered papers. Lunch in 20, she said. Then we file the countersuit. Clara nodded. The note held. But Edward's last words lingered like a discord unresolved. She looked out the window. The patrol cars were gone, the drive was empty. For now. The first board meeting was held in the old music room, the Steinway shoved to the wall like a grand piano-shaped monument. Clara wore the same charcoal blazer she'd bought for her senior recital, now tailored, sleeves still too long. 47 regional VPs stared back from the Zoom grid, another 12 sat around the mahogany table. The agenda was printed on heavy cream stock. Bennett Holdings, Day 1 under new leadership. Lila stood at Clara's right, tablet glowing. Markets up 8% since the freeze. Grayson walked. We're liquid, solvent and untouchable. She clicked to the next slide. But the REIT's bleeding on deferred maintenance. We fix it or we sell pieces. Clara didn't flinch. We fix it. 10,000 employees, remember who signs their checks. A gray-haired VP from Chicago cleared his throat. Miss Bennett, with respect, your resume says piano teacher. My resume says I balanced a non-profit on 38 grand a year, Clara said. Your profit and loss says you lost 4 million on a parking garage in Queens. Let's both do better. The room laughed, nervous, then genuine. Lila's grin flashed like a green light. The learning curve was brutal. Mornings with Lila, cap tables, debt waterfalls, EBITDA margins. Afternoons with James, tax shelters, fiduciary duty, the difference between a corp and an LLC. Nights alone in the study, Amelia's journals open beside SEC filings, William's handwriting in the margins, trust but verify. December brought snow and headlines. Piano prodigy inherits empire, screamed the Post. Paparazzi camped at the gate until Sam installed a drone jammer. Clara gave one interview, NPR Live from the music room, the Steinway in soft focus behind her. I'm not a billionaire, she told the host. I'm a steward. The money has a job. The job crystallized in January. She stood on the steps of Juilliard at noon, breath fogging in the cold. Cameras flashed. Behind her a banner the size of a billboard, the William Bennett Foundation, $2 billion for arts and affordable housing. Half to music and arts education in public schools, she said into the microphones. The other half to build 10,000 units of workforce housing in the 5 boroughs. Rents capped at 30% of median income. No loopholes. A reporter shouted, "What about your family's lawsuits?" Clara smiled the way William had taught her, small, unbreakable. Let them sue a charity. The lawsuits came anyway, 3 in February, 2 in March. Rachel Cohen quashed them like bugs. Discovery unearthed more Edwards offshore accounts, Margaret's shell PR firm, Nathan's gambling IOUs. The DA indicted in April. Edward took a plea, 5 years probation, full restitution. Margaret fled to Palm Beach. Nathan vanished. Spring arrived with dogwoods blooming along the drive. Clara's first anniversary in the house fell on a Friday. She sent invitations on heavy cream stock, same as the board agenda, but this time embossed with a single treble clef. Dinner. Music room. 7 p.m. Bring stories, not suits. James arrived first, tie abandoned, carrying a bottle of Barolo and a dog-eared copy of Bluebeard. Lila followed in a leather jacket, boots polished for once. Sam brought his wife Marisol and their toddler, who made a beeline for the Steinway. Eleanor emerged from the kitchen in a flour-dusted apron, bearing a roast the size of a small planet. Regional VPs trickled in Chicago, Atlanta, Seattle, faces Clara now knew by heart. Someone started a playlist, Coltrane, then Billy, then a student-recorded track from Clara's old Brooklyn Academy. The toddler banged out incredible chopsticks. Laughter ricocheted off the paneled walls. They ate family style at the long table, roast beef, Yorkshire pudding, Eleanor's famous gravy. James told the story of William's first hostile takeover, a piano prodigy at 16 out negotiating a room of Harvard MBAs. Lila countered with the time William fired a CFO for expensing a pet llama. Sam admitted he'd once guarded a pop star who insisted on traveling with a pet tiger. The toddler demanded to know if tigers liked piano. Clara listened, wineglass cool in her hand. The room smelled of rosemary and candle wax. Outside, the Hudson glittered under a half moon. She caught Eleanor's eye across the table. The housekeeper lifted her glass in silent toast. Later dishes cleared, someone pushed back the rugs. The Steinway lid rose like a curtain. Clara sat, flexed her fingers, and played first Debussy's Clair de Lune, the piece William had taught her at 5, then a boogie-woogie riff that had the toddler dancing on Sam's boots. Phones came out, not for evidence but for memory. At midnight, the guests gone, Clara found an envelope slid under the front door. Plain white, no return address. Inside a single sheet, Nathan's scrawled handwriting. Sis, I was wrong. About everything. The money, Dad, the break-in. I'm in rehab, court ordered. They say write amends. This is step 9. I don't expect forgiveness. Just know I'm trying to be the brother you deserved. If you ever want to talk, no strings, I'm here. Nathan. Clara stood in the foyer, moonlight striping the parquet. She read it twice, then folded it small and slipped it into the drawer with William's letters. She didn't tear it up, she didn't answer either. Upstairs, she paused at the music room. The Steinway weighted lid still open, a faint scent of rosin lingering. She sat, played the opening bars of Beethoven's Pathétique, slow, deliberate, the storm now a memory. Outside, the gate stood open for the first time in months. No paparazzi. No SUVs. Just the quiet road and the river beyond. Clara closed the lid. The house settled around her, old wood, older promises. Tomorrow, the foundation broke ground on its first housing site in the Bronx. Monday, the board voted on a scholarship program for 500 kids. Somewhere a child would play their first scale on a piano paid for by a man who believed music could build better than money ever could. She turned off the lights. The moon followed her up the stairs. In the bedroom, the glow in the dark stars still held their faint green constellations. Clara fell asleep to the sound of the Hudson lapping the bluffs, the house breathing steady around her. The war was over. The building had just begun. The letter from Nathan stayed in the drawer for 3 weeks. Clara opened it once, read it again under the weak light of the music room lamp, then closed the drawer without a word. Some chords she decided were better left unresolved. May arrived with dogwood petals drifting across the drive like late snow. The foundation's first housing site in the Bronx was ahead of schedule. The scholarship auditions had filled a rented hall in Harlem with nervous 12-year-olds clutching violins older than they were. Clara's days were spreadsheets and site visits, her nights quiet except for the occasional owl outside the bedroom window. On a Thursday that smelled of lilac and cut grass, the gate intercom buzzed. Sam's voice crackled through Nathan Bennett at the gate. "Alone. Says he'll wait on the bench." Clara stood on the front steps in jeans and one of William's old cardigan's sleeves rolled to the elbow. Nathan sat on the stone bench beneath the copper beech, thinner than she remembered, hoodie swapped for a clean denim shirt. His hands were folded between his knees like a schoolboy waiting for the principal. She didn't invite him inside. He stood when he saw her. 5 minutes. Then I leave. Clara stayed on the steps, arms crossed. Clock's ticking. Nathan swallowed. Rehab's in Pennsylvania. Court ordered 90 days. I'm on day 62. They make us write letters. He gestured vaguely toward the house. You didn't answer. I read it. Silence stretched, filled by bird song and the distant hum of a lawnmower. I was a junkie, he said finally. Not just cards, coke, oxy, whatever kept the noise down. Dad said the money would fix me. It didn't. I stole from Grandpa's safe. I helped Dad plan the break-in. I hated you for being clean. His voice cracked on the last word. Clara's throat tightened. She remembered Nathan at 15 teaching her to ride a bike on this very lawn, laughing when she crashed into the hydrangeas. The memory felt like someone else's life. I'm not asking for money, he continued. They've got me on a stipend, $50 a week. I'm working the kitchen. I peel potatoes, and I think about how I once blew 50 grand in one night at Mohegan Sunday. He laughed, a dry, broken sound. I'm sorry, Clara. For all of it. She studied his face, cheekbones sharper, eyes clearer than they'd been in years. Sorry doesn't rebuild what you tried to burn down. I know. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a cheap spiral notebook. Step 9. Making amends. I wrote you a real letter. Not the rehab form, you don't have to read it now. Or ever. He set it on the bench. I just needed to say it to your face. Clara didn't move. And Mom and Dad, Nathan's mouth twisted. Dad's appealing the plea. Says 5 years is cruel and unusual. Mom's in Palm Beach telling everyone you stole her inheritance. They're stuck. He shrugged, helpless. I can't fix them. I can only fix me. The wind lifted the notebook's corner. Clara watched it flutter, then settle. I won't give you money, she said. Not a cent. But if you stay clean, if you finish the program, there's a foundation grant for music therapy. You could train. Help kids like you were. That's the only door I'll open. Nathan's eyes glistened. That's more than I deserve. Maybe, Clara said. But it's what Grandpa would have done. He nodded, wiped his face with the back of his hand. Thank you. Don't thank me. Earn it. She turned to go. Clara. His voice stopped her. I really am proud of what you're building. The housing. The kids. You're the best of us. She didn't answer. The front door closed behind her with a soft click. Inside, Eleanor was arranging peonies in the foyer vase. She glanced up. Shall I make tea? Clara shook her head. I'm good. She went to the music room. The notebook from Nathan sat on the Steinway where she'd left it after carrying it in. She opened it. Page after page of cramped handwriting, memories of childhood summers, apologies for specific betrayals, a list of every dollar he'd stolen and where it went. The last page was a single line, I wish I'd learned piano instead of poker. Clara closed the book, set it beside William's last letter. She didn't cry. She played Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor, the one she'd butchered at 14 and perfected at 20. The house absorbed the sound, gave it back warmer. That afternoon, her phone buzzed with an email from James Edward. Filed another motion. Frivolous. Cohen denied in chambers. Attached was a Post article Margaret photographed leaving a Palm Beach gala caption, "Disinherited socialite vows revenge." Clara deleted it. Evening brought the team Lila, with takeout from her favorite Dominican place, Sam with his toddler asleep on his shoulder, James with a bottle of champagne chilled in a bucket shaped like a treble clef. They ate on the terrace, city lights twinkling across the Hudson. The toddler woke long enough to smear rice on Sam's shirt and demand more piano. Later dishes cleared, Clara stood at the railing. Lila joined her. "Your brother," Lila said quietly. "You okay?" Clara considered. "I forgave the boy who taught me to ride a bike. The man who showed up today. He's a stranger earning his way back." "That's different." Lila nodded. "Family's a choice, not a blood test." Inside, Eleanor turned on the fairy lights strung along the music room beams. Sam's wife snapped photos. James raised his glass. "To the family we build," he said. They drank. The toddler clapped sticky hands. Much later, Clara sat alone at the Steinway. She opened Nathan's notebook again, tore out the last page, the one about piano versus poker, and slipped it into the false panel beside William's ledger. A reminder, not a reconciliation. She played a soft blues riff, the kind William had improvised on lazy Sundays. The house settled around her, old wood, new memories, the faint scent of peonies drifting in from the foyer. Outside, the gate stood open. No cameras. No threats. Just the quiet road and the river beyond. Clara closed the lid. The note held suspended, perfect. Her family was inside, laughing in the kitchen over seconds of flan. Her legacy was in the Bronx and Harlem practice rooms, in the hands of children who would never know William Bennett's name but would play because of him. Blood had tried to drown her. Choice had taught her to swim. She turned off the lights. The moon followed her up the stairs, same as always. Tomorrow, the foundation broke ground on phase 2. The day after a kid from Bed-Stuy would audition on a piano paid for by a man who'd believed music could build better than money ever could. Clara fell asleep to the sound of the Hudson lapping the bluffs, the house breathing steady around her. Some doors stayed closed. Others opened wide enough to let the music through. The Hudson Valley lay under a thin quilt of November frost, the river, a dull silver ribbon below the bluffs. Clara's boots crunched on the gravel path of Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, a modest bouquet of carnations, William's favorite deep crimson, tucked inside her coat. The air smelled of wood smoke and turned earth. No paparazzi today, the gates had been quiet for months. William's plot was simple, a low granite stone, no taller than her knee, engraved only with his name, dates, and a single line, "He built in measures, not millions." She knelt, brushed frost from the letters, and laid the flowers at the base. They looked almost black against the pale stone. "Hi, Grandpa," she said, voice low, as if the other sleepers might overhear. "It's done. The foundation's solvent. 10,000 units breaking ground next spring. Scholarships for 500 kids this year alone. The company's clean, no more offshore ghosts." She traced the carved treble clef someone had added beneath the epitaph, "Eleanor's doing, no doubt. Your song's still playing." A crow landed on a nearby angel, cocked its head, and flew off. Clara smiled. "I know. You hate long speeches." She stood, hands in pockets, and let the silence settle. Somewhere below, a train whistle mourned across the water. The ache was still there, smaller now, a bruise instead of a wound, but it no longer defined the shape of her days. Back at the house, the afternoon light slanted gold through the music room windows. The Steinway waited, lid open, a fresh stack of sheet music on the stand. Clara had found the manuscript tucked inside Amelia's last journal, Clara's lullaby, 8 pages in William's spidery hand, dated the week she was born. She'd never heard it played. She sat, rolled her shoulders once, and began. The piece was quiet at first. Left hand, a walking bass in C, right hand, a melody that curled like smoke. No grand gestures, just a conversation between two voices, the old man who'd built towers and the child who'd only wanted to make them sing. The middle section lifted into a playful allegretto, William's chuckle in chords, then settled back into the lullaby, slower, deeper, until the final cadence resolved on a single perfect C major. Clara let the last note ring, then fade into the room's warm wood. She felt it in her sternum, peace, not absence. The strength wasn't in the 7 billion, it never had been. It was in the choice to keep building when everything said tear it down. She closed the lid gently. Outside, the wind stirred the oaks, sending a shower of bronze leaves across the terrace. The house breathed with her old beam's new purpose, the faint scent of carnations drifting in from the foyer vase. Clara stood at the window, hands pressed to the cool glass. Across the lawn, Eleanor was showing Sam's toddler how to plant bulbs along the path, tiny fists clutching dirt, laughter carrying on the breeze. Lila's voice floated from the study, arguing good-naturedly with James over zoning permits. The foundation's latest newsletter lay open on the table, a photo of a Bronx girl, maybe 10, grinning beside her new cello. This was the legacy. Not the money, though it helped. Not the lawsuits, though they'd forged her. It was the lesson carved into every measure William had ever played live: honestly build community, choose your family in the ones who stay when the music stops. Clara stepped onto the terrace. The wind lifted her hair, cool and certain. She whispered into it the way she once had at 5, hiding under the Steinway while William practiced. "Thank you, Grandpa. For everything." The breeze answered, soft, deliberate, ruffling the carnations on the hall table, stirring the score on the stand, carrying the scent of river and wood smoke through the open door. A single leaf drifted in, landed on the keys and stayed. Clara smiled. The house was quiet, but it was singing. And for the first time in her life, she knew every note by heart.